G'day, it's UAVfutures here, and today, wow! Oh look, I'm a ninja. Well, we're going to be taking a look at this. Now this is the Flynosaurus Hex, and I absolutely love this, the name of this thing. And the description says, just think of a Tyrannosaurus Rex with 6 arms. So definitely awesome little frame from the Flyno shop. We're going to chuck it on the bench. Can't wait to sort of get started. We'll have a look at how it comes, and let's check it out. Alright. Alrighty, so here's everything that we're going to get, and I've got to say this looks totally different to most kits that I've been building lately, so I'm super excited. We'll just have a look quickly. So what we're going to get, so I guess we've got our brace plate and also our bottom plate. It comes with a PDB, which I'll talk about in a little bit. We've got our FPV sort of mounts just here, and then this is sort of our pod section, so we're going to have our FPV camera and all our gear just inside here, and that's the brace between the two. And we actually have, look at this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 arms, and all these arms are identical because this frame is sort of has great symmetry. So we've got our 6 arms to put in here, but check this out. This is how much hardware you need to actually put this frame together. So if you don't like fiddling around with screws or anything like that, you're going to be in for a shock, because there is a ton of screws and things to put in when you're building this bad boy. Anyway, let's jump right in. We'll have a look at this sort of brace plate, and then we'll move through and look at the other parts. Okay, so I guess this is kind of usually I start with the base plate and things like that, but it's a little bit different on this Hex because these parts are so small. So these are sort of the 2 plates we're going to use to sandwich our arms, and I'm going to call, I guess, this one the brace plate and this one the bottom plate. So let's have a very quick look at these. Let's have a look at their thicknesses. All right, so the bottom plate is coming in at 1.4, so 1.5 millimeters, and this sort of middle plate here is coming in at 1.5 as well. So not the thickest of carbon, I've got to say, in just here, but it's going to be very interesting when it's actually chocked up with its thick arms to see how strong it is. You can see here the way it's designed to be perfectly symmetrical, so you're going to have a very even distribution on the angles around here from the arms, and that's great because it also allows our arms to be interchangeable. And this is going to fit, this sort of top plate just here is going to fit perfectly on our bottom plate, and they're going to line up great. Let's see if I can do this. I wonder if it matters which way. Yeah, they're going to line up great, so you can mount your arms sort of between them and sandwich them in like here. Personally, I think I would love one single base plate. That would make things a lot easier, but I understand by doing it this way, it's going to keep the cost down significantly, because you can cut a lot more of these out than if you're cutting out, you're actually wasting a lot of carbon if you're cutting out a huge sort of Hex out of one piece. Now, nothing too special about this. I guess it's got 2 little brace parts just here. Most of it's hollow. And if it was me and I was going to run my battery, I would have my battery running this way, so it's got a bit more support. It can rest on these a little bit instead of running it that way, where I think it might get cut up a little bit more. Looking at the middle plate. Now, I guess it's got a little arrow here, so you can tell which way is the front. And something I do like about this one, if you wanted to build, it's got your standard 36 by 36 sort of naze size or standard flight controller or PDB. I say standard PDB because this one actually comes with a special one, but you can fit any size sort of 36 by 36 little board in here, which is a great addition. And then the other special part about here, you can see it's got these little holes, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they use a really clever system to lock in, and I'll show you this a little bit later on. They use a really clever system to lock in the sort of FPV pod on top. I really like that solution. I think it's strong and also simple, so it works well. Anyway, these aren't too spectacular looking at them like this, so let's have a look at the arms that actually go in the thing, and then we'll move on. Alright, now these are the arms, and you get 6 of these bad boys, and they are all identical. So I'm just going to look at one right here. And super simple design. Let's see how thick they are. They're coming in at, let's see, this thing's having like a heart attack just here. Alright, we're coming in at 4 millimeter arms, and they're going to be super tough because they're not actually the longest of arms. They're only designed to run a 4-inch prop, so you're not going to get too much pressure or torque on the edge because they're only spanning a short distance. I really like how they haven't cut out any holes or anything in here to try and save weight, and they understand the importance of just having a nice solid arm, so it's going to be very, very tough. And you look just here, they can take 22 size motors or also your 18 size motors, so maybe rocking some 1806s or 2204s or 2205s or something like that. Alrighty, so here is the FPV section, I guess, or the pod section. This is where you're going to house all your components. And they've got a really clever system, the way they lock together just here, and they actually use a little screw and a bolt to go through to sort of make a really strong brace. And I love how they've used carbon instead of just a standoff. So usually frames like this will have a standoff in here, but I think this is much stronger. These 2 little braces just here, I think, what are they, 2.5 or 3 millimeter? Yeah, they're coming in at 3 millimeter, and this middle one just here is 2.5. 2.5 across the middle. And these two things also come with some little HS117 mounts, and they're made out of this sort of flexible printed plastic, and that's just going to sit just here inside, and that's going to allow you to sort of mount your HS117 camera and get some really good angles on that. And also, because they're made out of this sort of flexible plastic, it's going to hold up a lot better in crashes, I think, and might also reduce some of the vibrations when you're flying around. Now, this is the PDB that comes with the frame, so let's have a look at this. And this is designed to fit the Afro Mini, so the Rev 3 Afro Mini, and that's going to fit in perfectly and line up with these pins at the front. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 connections for your ESCs, which is great. Something I really do like is these little cutouts at the back mean you can loop your wire up and directly solder it in just here for your battery wire, and it's going to be very tough. You're not going to break that. I don't think you're going to rip that off the board at all. And on the underside, it's got some little pads just here for your little Polulu 5-volt regulator. So you can put that in there, and that's going to power your flight controller and things like that. So you're going to have a great little compact stack in here when you're flying around, which is very important because you actually don't have too much space when you're building sort of this design. Now you've got some little pads just here at the back. So this is your ground and voltage, and this is your 5-volt and ground. 5 volt and ground. So you've got your 5 volts at the front and your sort of standard connections at the back. So that's going to be great if you need to power something like your VTX or something like that off these two pads. And it's pretty cool. If you're getting confused, they've got a nice little arrow at the front, which lines up with the front of, where is it? The front of this board, and it lets you know that that is the front of the quads. Alrighty, so there you go. You can see both the front arrows are facing that way. And then, of course, you've got your stack of hardware, which I talked about at the start. So a ton of screws and bolts and things like that. But you also get some spares in here, which is nice. But definitely, you've got a lot of these to put together. Anyway, enough chit-chat about the individual parts. Let's put it together. I'm not going to show you how long it takes because I've tried to put it together before, and it took me forever. So I'm just going to cut to what it looks like right here. Woo! All right, and I gotta say, after putting together some unibody frames and things like that, this thing is an absolute mission to try and put this together. So I felt like I needed 10 pairs of hands, I guess. So totally insane trying to put this together. It was very fiddly, but in saying that, it looks awesome. I mean, look at this thing. I really love the shape around the outside. I think it's got a perfect circle, which is fantastic. And it's really going to distribute the weight fantastically across the whole frame itself. And as I was talking about before, you can see it's got a fantastic little clever way of locking in the top pod there, so that makes for a very secure and strong connection, so that's a great idea. And something I do like, you've actually got a bit more room in here for your camera and things like that, and your FPV gear, I guess, compared to some of the other smaller quads from the Flyno shop, which have a smaller stack in here. So this thing can run a full-size flight controller, which is great. Now, checking out the middle here, even though I'm saying you can stick a full stack inside here, you still don't have the most amount of room compared to some other quads, and definitely the quads anyway that have the longer bodies, because we are using this sort of pod style, so it's going to mean you need to be a pretty competent builder, I think, to get the most out of these frames. And I guess another thing you really need to note is that this thing is made to run 4-inch quads. It looks like it can spin a 5-inch quad prop just here. Actually, let me get one. So it looks like you could be swinging 5-inch props, but because you've got the clearance here, but what actually happens is they'll run into each other up here, so it can only spin a 4-inch prop. And compared to its 4-inch quad brothers, this thing is going to take up a considerable larger space when it's flying through the air. So it's going to be pushing, I can't talk properly, it's going to be pushing a lot more air around, and also the surface area of the whole thing itself is going to be a lot bigger. I do like this little back brace just here, how instead of using just a standoff, because this is quite a long sort of stretch just here, they've decided to use some carbon. I think that's great. And it's also going to make it great if you want to put some LEDs or something like that on the back. You can actually zip tie them straight to here, or use this possibly as an antenna extension. Rightio, so that's the bare frame, but let's put it together, and I'm going to cut to a shot of it all built, and then I guess we'll talk about how she flew and what she was like building it. Alright, so here she comes in 3, 2, 1, and I wish building was this easy. 3, 2, 1. Ta-da! Alright, so here it is, all finished and built, and I gotta be honest, this thing was surprisingly a lot easier to build than I thought it was going to be. Even though it has 6 motors and 6 ESCs, it actually came together quite quickly, and I think there was a lot of space in here, even though it looks like it's pretty crowded. I guess on the flat plane, there was a lot of space around here to put all your components in and things like that, so that was great. And soldering was super easy to this PDB, because it was like, if you remember what it was a fairly big PDB in there, so you've got plenty of room for those first-time solderers. Let's move on to some of the features that I really do like. Now, I really like these two little poles just here. Now, I don't think they're made for your pigtail, but that's what I'm going to use them for, so they worked great for me. Maybe they're made for running your antenna out or something like that, but I'm definitely a big fan of your pigtail. So, and I think all frames need to have somewhere where you can safely attach your antenna that's not going to wreck your VTX in a crash. These camera mounts at the front, I think they're great, fantastic. Really, really rate the sort of soft, I think it's TPA, the plastic this is made out of, so it's nice and spongy. It's going to help your camera in a crash. Worst comes to worst, it's probably just going to pop out, but I definitely think that that's going to save your camera because it is a little bit exposed on the front of the frame like that. And just looking at the thing, there's a heap of space up in here, which I didn't think I was going to have. I thought it was going to be very crowded up here. So I've definitely got a lot more space than I thought, especially considering sort of how small this little pod on the top is. Alrighty, so now let's talk about some of the things I would improve on the frame or possibly in some new revisions. And I know the guys over at the Flyno shop are always working hard on improving their products, so they're probably going to be really waiting to hear what I say here. But these holes here at the back, I'm not sure what their original purpose was, but it'd be great if one of them would hold the pigtail more securely, because at the moment it's moving around a little bit and it's not cut to the perfect size of this, or you could have a little bit out the back. In the bottom here, I wish there was actually somewhere to run your XT60 connector out the back, possibly just a little bit of the carbon that came out here like sort of like so, and that would be a great way to zip tie your XT60 connector, because at the moment I've got it out here on the arms, and I think it's sort of, oh, there goes my battery. And it's also zip tied down here at the base of the PDB. I know you can't really see it, but there's a big zip tie in there holding it down, but I don't like all that pressure on the PDB. It'd be nice if there was a little cutout just back here in the carbon. As far as the PDB goes, it was a little bit confusing finding out which one was the signal wire and which one was the ground wire, sort of for these smaller ESC wires and the ground and the signal right here. I had to actually get out my multimeter and hook the battery up to find out which one would be the ground and which one was the signal. So maybe just a little bit more labeling on the PDB. Underneath right here, you can see, it's a little bit difficult to see, but there's actually two little straps that you sort of run your battery strap through, and they're probably a little bit too thin. So if you look at some of the earlier shots, and I'll show you just here, but I think they're actually maybe a little bit too thin. They need to be a little bit wider. Because I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on here if they have a bad crash, especially with a heavy battery, because it is a Hex. So I don't think it'd add very much weight, but I'd probably make those maybe another mil or two wider. Now, I got mine at the same time I got the Orion, and it came with all sorts of hardware for mounting it together. But for these screws just here that held my kit down, and look, yours might be different if you buy them, maybe they sent me a different package or something like that, but I actually had trouble sourcing the screws that go into here that are long enough, because all the ones that came with the packaging of this frame, in my version anyway, weren't long enough. But luckily, I've got a ton of quads around. I was actually able to pull these out of my old ZMR, and they went in and they were the perfect length. But if you're not as fortunate as me and you don't have spare quads lying around, that could be an issue, but I'm sure the guys will be able to look into that. Maybe mine was just an unlucky one. And then I guess one of the biggest issues for me is that this thing uses an Afro Mini. Now, they're great little flight controllers, are sort of based. They're pretty much like a Naze, but they don't have a USB port, so that can make it very difficult unless you have one of these FTDI sort of connectors, and a lot of people don't have these around. So if you're expecting to get a kit and you're ready to hook it up, and then you sort of, it's all sold, and you think, right, how do I hook this up to my computer? You actually need to get one of these. So that can be very difficult for people. So I'm not sure how I feel about the Afro Mini. If there was a different, I guess you could use some of the other flight controllers that have a little USB attachment, but this one's specially made for the Afro Mini. So there's sort of, I have some reservations about that. But in saying that, it does perform very well when it's flying, and I think it's a great little flight controller. It's just the USB part that I don't like about it. Alright, with that all said and done, let's talk about its flight characteristics. And probably the biggest thing I noticed was in a heavy punch out, this thing felt super locked in. So usually when you do a bit of a punch out, especially when you get something on a default tune, you might find it sort of drifts a little bit towards that sort of high end bit of the throttle. But when I was punching this thing, it just felt super locked in, like it would just stay its course. That was really great to see, and I'm sure that comes down to having 6 motors and how it spreads the thrust out so evenly. It was definitely great to sort of feel that locked in straight away when I was flying. And another thing I definitely noticed a big difference between the Hex and flying the quads is on the Hex, when you sort of do a sharp turn or something like that, it really grips the air, and that's because it's got 6 of these propellers spinning, so it's got a lot more bite sort of in the air that it's flying through. So I could definitely feel that, and that was a really nice surprise. On the flip side, some of the things I found a little bit different, and I guess are a bit of a disadvantage to flying the Hex. it felt a lot heavier, so it had more power, but it was also a bit heavier, so it actually reminded me a bit of my 5S build. Even though it had more thrust, it still felt very heavy a little bit in the turns, if that sort of makes sense. And then, I don't know if this is just the Betaflight software or something, or if it's because it's my first Hex, but compared to its other quads, this thing was a lot more jumpy or sort of jerky. It needs definitely a little bit more tuning, as opposed to some of its sort of quad brothers. So that was sort of the biggest differences that I had here. But with all that said and done, this is definitely a really fast, capable little machine, and because of its compact size, I'm actually really interested to see how it's going to go in some of the races and things like that. I might race it against some of my friends who are racing their quads, because I don't know anyone with a Hex actually. So I'm really interested to see how it goes side by side versus some of those. So it's definitely got a bit more weight, but it's also got a bit more thrust, so that should be very interesting. Anyway, I'm going to leave you guys with some flight footage, and I'll explain a little bit about that as well in a minute. Subscribe for more FPV related content, and as always, happy flying! We're about to do the maiden of the Flynosaurus Hex. Let's see how she goes. Alrighty, so here it is on its sort of maiden flights, and this is just sort of giving it a little test, so maybe a bit of a roll and some things like that. And then giving a little bit of a punch out, and you can definitely see those oscillations in a high punch out, but in saying that, it does jump up quite high very quickly, so it's great at climbing. And something I really didn't think about until flying a Hex, you can definitely notice the prop wash. So when you're coming back into the turbulent air and you're sort of descending, it's definitely a little bit more shaky, I guess, because it's pushing out so much more turbulent air underneath it because of the 6 motors and 6 props. I'm really looking forward to taking this thing out, I guess, and putting it on a track and just seeing how it's going. And because it's got that sort of small form factor, I think it's going to be great, and I don't have to worry too much about the gates or anything like that, because I know Hexes traditionally can be really, really big, so it's going to be fantastic actually being able to smash this thing around a race course. So I'm really looking forward to getting some more flight time on this. Anyways, I'm just going to let this stuff play out, so feel free to watch it. There's definitely going to be a lot more flight footage coming from this Hex, because I'm having a lot of fun with it actually. It's going to be great. Anyway, subscribe for more FPV related content, and as always, happy flying!